On today's episode of Empowering Women in Real Estate, the podcast, we're going to be talking about halfway there, a mid-year refresh for women in real estate.
Hi, I'm Karen Cooper, a wife, mom of three, real estate broker, team owner, and founder of Empowering Women in Real Estate. As a realtor, I've personally helped well over 700 families in my career, and now I help thousands of women from all across the country balance real life and real estate through daily inspiration, motivation, and actionable plans to increase their success. Listen in as I share stories and tips from my life and business and interview some of my favorite people.
Hey there, I'm glad you're here for today's episode. This is our annual, we do this every year. In fact, I think we do this like 4 times a year because I am a huge believer in regularly reviewing your business and regularly reviewing your life. And so we do a first quarter review, we do a big mid-year, refresh, reset, we do a third quarter review, and then of course we do like a big end of year, annual review and goal setting type conversation. But so we're going to talk about the mid-year reset and the mid-year refresh. I really kind of like the idea, and I've been kind of shifting this language a little bit the last couple of years around a refresh. It's not just about reviewing, what's happening and your progress and, how you're pacing on your goals. I mean, obviously we want to do those things too, but it's really kind of about refreshing and resetting, especially if the first half of your year has been, maybe it's been unexpected, maybe you've had some things that have happened in your life or in your business that have been, maybe unusual or unexpected or, kind of some changes that have happened that can really kind of shift the trajectory that you're on. And I know for me, I tend to be such a, what's the right word? Stubborn is one word that comes to mind. But if I say I'm going to do it, if I write it down, then I am going to do it. And I am all in on it, come hell or high water. And sometimes, things change and goals change and objectives change and perspectives change. And it's okay to let go of maybe something that you said you were going to do or you were planning to do. And so I think it's important to give ourselves permission for that. And so that's really something that I like to do myself as I'm kind of thinking about this as more of a kind of a refresh and a reset so that I can take what I've learned and whatever experience and things that have happened in the first half of the year and, carry over the good part into the second half and let go of the bad part. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give you some ideas, some discussion kind of questions for yourself, maybe some journaling questions. We're going to talk about kind of the typical review. I'll run through that super fast of what's happened so far in your year. Because if you've been listening to these episodes for a long time, this podcast is now almost 6 years old. No, more than that, I think, actually, maybe almost 7 years old. You may have heard some of this before. So I'm going to go really quick through that and then kind of lean into some of these other questions for you to kind of think about and consider. I will also say that mid-year refresh, this is the topic of our July meetups in Empowering Women in Real Estate. So, this podcast actually was born out of a community that I created 12 years ago called Empowering Women in Real Estate. We started out on Facebook. We have a group there of well over 42,000 women in the real estate industry. And as a part of that community, we have local leaders in cities all across the country that gather small groups of our community members. And they get together and they have lunch or they have coffee or they, I think there's even a group that does a happy hour and I think there's a group that does a breakfast. So we have these small meetups that happen monthly in some places, quarterly in others. And we have a similar topic that each group discusses each month. And this is our topic for July, is mid-year refresh. So you definitely want to look and see if there is a group that meets in your area. That can be a great way to plug in and to connect. You can go onto our website, which is empoweringwomeninrealestate.com, and click on monthly meetup. And there you're going to find all of the information that you need on any of the locations. And then if you're not in a city where we have a group that meets, then join me for the virtual meetup. I take the same topic and I host it as a virtual meetup that's open to anyone. And the virtual meetup for July is going to be on Thursday, July the 2nd at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There will be a link in the show notes for you to register. It's free. All you have to do is just register for the Zoom, and we'd love to have you there. So let's kind of move into today's episode. There's kind of 3 segments to this that I want to take you through for today. The first one is acknowledge and celebrate. The second one is take inventory and review the data. And then the third one is set the course. And so let's start with acknowledge and celebrate. And acknowledge and celebrate, I think, is something that we don't do enough. We achieve something, we set a goal, we hit the mark, we have a big closing, we have whatever it is that happens. And we tend to it's like barely a blink or barely an acknowledgement of what we achieved, of what happened, of what we did. And we just kind of move on to the next thing. We're just, moving on to the next thing constantly. And I think it's really important for our confidence. It's really important for building, and if you listen to, you're going to hear this in an episode next week with Krista Dempster, building your resilience resume, right? It's like your proof of what you've done. It helps to build that confidence in you. And it helps, I think, to make for a little bit more of a happier life and a happier experience when you take time to acknowledge and take time to celebrate. And so I want you to do that. I want you to think about the first half of the year and think about, what are you proud of? Are there some accomplishments, whether they were numbers centric or just maybe something new that you tried. Maybe it was something a little outside of your comfort zone that you did. It could be anything, but something that you are proud of that you did or accomplished in the first half of the year. And something that I like to do when I'm, kind of struggling to think, I can barely remember. I couldn't tell you what I had for lunch yesterday. There's just so much happening all the time. And to try to think back to what happened in January or February, it can be hard to do. So if you're kind of stuck on this, just take 5 minutes and scroll through your calendar. And that will refresh you on what happened over the course of the first half of the year. Scroll through your camera roll. If you're like me, I tend to snap a lot of pictures. Maybe they're in your camera roll and they're kind of there. Or maybe if you do a lot of stories on Instagram, and I think you can probably do this on Facebook, but I don't know how. But on Instagram, if you look in your archive under your profile, if you save your stories there, then you can just kind of quickly click through, and that will help you to jog your memory. And so I'm going to think about the things that you're proud of, and I want you to take a minute and just celebrate those. Just really acknowledge that and just celebrate that. You should feel proud of those things. And then I want you to think about, as we kind of move from acknowledging and celebrating and moving into taking inventory, I want you to think about what is working right now, what worked the first half of the year, and then also what didn't work. Were there things that you did or things that you tried in your business or maybe just in your personal life? Is there a habit or a routine that you're in that is just really not serving you, that's not working for you? Take some time and really kind of think about those things. And it can be small things, I'll give you a silly example. Here's something that I have found over the past couple months that works for me. And it's not something that I always used to do. What works for me is unloading the dishwasher around dinner time. I will unload the dishwasher will run during the day. I will unload it and then I'll load the dinner dishes. And then I don't run it again until the next day after I have coffee and usually after I've had my lunch. Because what I found, I love my morning. And I tend to be most creative in the morning. And I tend to be most reflective in the morning. And what I found is that I'm spending so much time in the morning, with chores, unloading I got to feed all the animals, and then I'm unloading the dishwasher and making the coffee. And what I found is that if If I don't run the dishwasher the night before and I leave room for the breakfast and the lunch dishes the next day, then I can prep the coffee pot, right? So all I have to do is walk downstairs and hit the button, and I don't have to unload. Especially because like at night, my kids, like they eat, they cook, like I don't need, like there's a whole nother life that happens in my house with these kids at night. And so when I come down every morning, there are dishes. And so then I can just put them in the dishwasher. And so that works for me. So what is your version of that? Like, are there things like that that are kind of working for you in your life and in your business? And what are the things that aren't working for you? Like, is there a habit that's not working? Is there a routine that's not working? Is there, a strategy with your marketing that's not working? Is there something, that is just kind of not working? And the reason that we want to think about those things, especially the stuff that's not working, it's not just to fix it. I think there's a tendency, and I am like this, that if something's not working, I just want to fix it. And actually, sometimes you don't just need to fix it. You just need to let it go. Like, it's not working because it's not meant for you right now. And it's not that you need to put a lot of time and energy into making it better or improving it or fixing it or whatever. It's maybe you just kind of need to let it go. And so taking some time to consider that is really important. You're going to want to take some time and review the data. And a lot of people I know will pause here and they won't want to do it because, they think it takes too much time, or, if you've had a great first half of the year, you think you're too busy, or if you didn't have a great first half of the year, you want to ignore it and you don't want to look at it. But honestly and truly, like looking at that data, that is what allows you to take the emotion out of wherever you are in your business right this minute. Like maybe if you could have had a terrible first 4 months of the year, but if you're busy right now, then your perception of your business and your perception of your marketing could be everything is great and amazing and everything is working. And maybe it is right this second, but it didn't for the first quarter. So why? Or it could be vice versa. Like maybe you had a great first quarter, maybe you had a great first 4 or 5 months of the year, but if you're slow right this minute and you don't have anything in your pipeline, then you might think that everything in the world is wrong with your business and you've got to change it all. And that's not necessarily true. So the only way I think to move away from the emotion of that is to look at the data. And so what you want to do when I'm saying data is I want you to pull all of your transactions from the first half of the year. And this is probably really easy for you. Like at our brokerage, I'm with Real. We have a dashboard, and I can just log right in and pull a report. So it's super easy for me to do that. And so your brokerage probably has something similar where you can easily pull your data. If not, then you could pull it from the MLS and just make sure that you add in anything that wasn't like an off-market sale. We do a lot of that here. Off-market sales are like new constructions aren't in the MLS. You want to make sure that you add that in. Or if you don't have that, if maybe you track it already in a spreadsheet, or you could always just ask your broker. That's another option. But gather that information. And it's not just gathering the information of the closings, but I want you to take the extra step, and I want you to figure out and write down very, very specifically, where did each transaction come from? I want you to take another step and another step and another step. So maybe you had a transaction that closed as a result of an open house. Okay, well, how did you get that open house? Was it your listing? Well, where did that listing come from? Was it an open house that you sat for another agent in your office? Well, what did you do to get that open house? Did you reach out proactively to other agents, or did that agent, reach out to you? That's what I want you to do. I want you to go another step and another step as you are tracking where each transaction came from. Because what that does is it helps you to see very clearly what the actions are that you did, what happened specifically to create that business. And that is really what we're trying to get to the heart of. Like, what worked? Where very, 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 very specifically did the business come from? And so once you do that, then you can start to see patterns. Okay, well, multiple of my transactions resulted from, this thing, and multiple came from that thing. And then what you want to do is you want to compare that to your marketing activities. We are just about 3 months out from our 6th annual Empowering Women in Real Estate Conference. And I want to take just a second to talk to you about who's going to be on the stage. We really have built a lineup this year that reflects
what the women in our community really need right now. And when I say that, I'm talking about you as like the whole professional, like not just a real estate agent, who we are as women, not just like one-dimensional people. And so what you end up walking away with from our event this year is going to be sharper business strategies. You're going to hear from speakers on things like how to keep promises to yourself, how to show up in the world, how to be iconic, how to really lean into who you are authentically, how to manage stress and anxiety, how to build wealth and manage your income. There's so much that's going to be happening. And these are not throwaway sessions. They all belong in the same room as business content because women at this level know it's all connected. Like it's not just one thing. And so our speaker announcements are starting to roll out on Instagram and in our Facebook group. You're going to be hearing from our speakers starting with next week's podcast episode. And if you're not registered yet, I'd love for you to do so. The link is in the show notes. Our early bird tickets, I think, are all gone by now, but you can definitely jump in now and still get one of our general admission tickets. And I would love to see you there.
If you are investing a ton of money in Google pay-per-click, like I don't know if anybody even does that anymore, but I'm just kind of making things up. Like let's say that you put a lot of money into Google pay-per-click, but zero of your closed business came from anything that resembles Google or the Google pay-per-click. Well, that's a sign that you need to make some changes in your marketing, right? Or maybe if multiple of your transactions came from referrals from other agents outside of your market, and you don't do any marketing to other agents outside of your market, maybe then that's something that you want to start doing. Like, can you be more active in some Facebook groups for some of those referrals? Can you do some pop-by mailers and kind of nurture those relationships with those agents so that then when they, it works exactly the same as how we work our sales business. When they know an agent in their office or they see a colleague or somebody on social media says, hey, do you know an agent in such and such area? Then they'll tag you. Well, they're only going to do that if they remember you. So it's the same thing. How can you nurture them? Like, can you put a nurturing plan in place for other agents, right, to grow agent referrals? So that's really a big part of the reason to review this data from these last 6 months so that you can really understand where your business came from and make that comparison to make sure that the marketing that you're doing and where you're spending your time and your effort is really paying off. And, that is definitely a lot easier to do if you had a lot of transactions. If you had a good bit of business in the first half of the year, then it's a lot easier to see those patterns. If you didn't have a lot of business, then that is a little bit more challenging. But also that can be an eye-opener, right? If you only had a couple of transactions in the first half of the year and maybe you don't have anything or you've just got one or two things in your pipeline, well, then you need to really examine and be honest with yourself about what you're doing. Are you really following consistently the marketing plan that you've set forth in your business? Are you staying in touch consistently? Are you showing up on social media? Are you showing up in your audience, your database, your whoever's email inboxes and social media feeds? And are they seeing you? If there is no business, then you need to look at what you did to get that business and where that came from and what's going to work. And I would love to tell you that there is a way to generate business where you don't have to show up and it just comes to you, but I have yet to figure out what that is. And so the best thing to do is you need to show up and you need to figure out, what you've done and compare, like, where are you really spending your time and what is your days looking like and how much of that is helping you to generate business. Because the lead generation part is the part where a lot of agents struggle. What I will tell you though, is that it is the area that when you figure it out, that makes the biggest impact in your life and in your business. It's the easiest to replicate once you kind of figure out what your things are. I am so clear on what my pillars are. And I am very clear on what my activities are to support my pillars. And so it's very easy for me to do those things consistently. And as a result, I have consistent leads and consistent opportunities that come in. And so spending the time and the effort to dial that stuff in is really going to take you far. And it's probably not going to be from you paying for something. It's just not. Most of what I do, I don't pay for it. Like I create my email newsletter and my postcards and social media. Social media is free. Referrals and showing up in the community and creating content around that. Like those are things that they feel very natural to me, and it just works. So I want you to look at that. I want you to evaluate as you're kind of thinking about, what isn't working, and, maybe as you're doing that comparison between where your business came from and what your marketing activities and your prospecting activities are. What do you need to reevaluate? What do you need to let go of? Because sometimes there are things that we need to let go of, and it can be hard sometimes. There is a real balance, because when you start a new marketing activity or plan or strategy, you don't see consistent results immediately. It can take 6 months. It can take a year. Again, this is why we do these things quarterly, so that you can start to see patterns and start to see what's really working and what's really happening. So you need to do some reevaluation there. And then the other thing that you want to, as you're kind of doing this, taking inventory and reviewing the data, is I want you to think about what has changed. If you're listening to this episode, the day it airs is June 24th. And so who you are and what your life looks like today on June 24th very well could be different than what your life looked like on January 24th or February 24th or March 24th. Life changes and things happen and markets change. And there could have been a big something that has happened in your home with a family member or maybe with your own health. And those are things that can kind of change and shift where you are and what you're doing. There could be changes that have happened in your market. There's a multitude of things. And so I think looking at and taking some time to consider what has changed, and we're not looking at that as like an excuse, like, oh, I didn't do great because of this. You're looking at the factual reality of, okay, this is something that has changed. And does that change impact my business? Does it impact how I show up? Does it impact my energy? Does it impact my finances? It's important to recognize those things. And then the last kind of piece with that kind of taking inventory and reviewing the data part is, do you need to adjust your goals? I think that that's a really important thing to look at this time of year. I feel like there is a tendency sometimes, and I have been this person, where you feel like it's a failure if you have to adjust your goals. But truly, this happens sometimes, and it has happened to me, where a goal that I set at the beginning of the year, by the time I get to the middle of the year, I realize this isn't even important to me anymore. This isn't something that I want to continue to pursue. And it's okay. It's okay to have that. It's okay to change a goal. It's okay to put it on the back burner. It's okay to set it aside maybe for next year or, 5 years from now, or maybe for never. It's okay to do that. The other thing is, when it comes to your very numbers specific and production specific goals, understanding how you're pacing, I think, is really important. Because if you are pacing, or sometimes maybe you've even hit the goal that you set for yourself at mid-year, well, sometimes, depending on your personality type, you could be like, okay, I'm done. I'm done for the rest of the year. Well, what happens in real estate when you do that? When you take your foot completely off the gas and you stop engaging with your business, not saying that you have to, work yourself to death all the time, but when you stop engaging with your database and your community and whatever your pillars are, well, it's going to take months for you to get it back. So if you say now, oh gosh, yep, I'm done. I've done all I wanted to do. I'm just going to coast for the rest of the year. Well, now you have set yourself up to have a very slow first quarter next year and probably a very slow second quarter next year. So the ramifications on that are actually very far reaching. So maybe you need to set a new goal, or maybe you want to revise that goal. Same thing. If you are not pacing for your goal, if it's going to, and I know people like this, if you're going to feel so defeated, there's no way, I'm not pacing for this goal. I am very not likely to meet this. And if that has you kind of feeling defeated, and then that defeated energy sort of kind of continues on into what you do and how you show up for your business, that can actually make things go a lot worse. It could be more powerful for you to adjust your goal to something that you are pacing for, or something that is a little bit higher than what you're pacing for. there is no shame in doing an adjustment in that goal at mid-year. So I want you to think about that and then make some adjustments if you need to. There's no shame or problem there. And then the last phase of this mid-year refresh is setting the course for the next half of the year. There's a couple of things to consider as you are doing that. And one of them is, what do you want the second half of the year to feel like? How do you want to spend your time? This is kind of a fun one or a good one to consider, is think about what is a day or a couple days that you've had this first half of the year that were just, those days when you reach the end of the day and you're just like, yeah, you know what? This was a good day. It was a good day. What were those days? And kind of click through your calendar a little bit or click through your photos again to help to kind of jog your memory on what those were. So what happened on that day? Was it a nice mix of like business and family time? Was it a day where you maybe gave yourself a little bit of time and space to do some things that you wanted or a hobby that you wanted? What was it? Was it something that you did that you felt really accomplished? Like really kind of thinking about what those favorite days were and looking at the makeup of those days, that can really help you to create more of those days. Like you shouldn't only have one good day a month or one good day a quarter. How can you adjust your life and your business so that you can have more good days, multiple good days? So I want you to think about that. And what do you want that second half of your year to feel like? Because the reality is like what that second half of your year is like, it's made up of a series of days, right? Every day is either moving you closer to what you want or your goals or how you feel, or it's moving you further away. And so really kind of looking at that. I love the questions of what do you want to experience more of? What do you want more of? What do you want less of? Really kind of thinking about your day-to-day, thinking about what's happening in your business, thinking about your habits and how you're taking care of yourself and how you're showing up for your family. What do you want more of? What do you want less of? And then lastly, I love the idea of just choose like 3 priorities for the next half of the year. And it could be a goal that you already have established, and maybe it's a specific action step or action steps that are specific to that goal. And that's really going to be your priority that you're going to focus on. Or maybe you kind of have one priority for business and one priority for personal, and maybe you have one priority for your health, right? I think that can be separate of personal. Personal could be hobbies, things that you enjoy, how you spend your time. Health is like your physical health, your spiritual health, your mental health. Maybe you have a priority in each one of those categories, and that's kind of what you focus on. Because, the thing that I find, and I just said this to my business partner the other day, I'm so guilty of this, that I tend to take on too many things and do too many things. I genuinely am excited about my business and my life and the possibilities and what can happen. And I have all these great ideas and things that I want to do. But the problem is when you try to do all of them at the same time, then you're not really making any progress on anything. And that can become really frustrating. And so, helping to kind of hone in on what those couple of priorities are. It's amazing. What is that? There's some quote. We underestimate what we can accomplish in a year, and we overestimate what we can accomplish in a day. And I think that's really true. When I look at my daily to-do list, sometimes they are so long and so ridiculous. Like there's no way that I can accomplish all of that in one singular day. But yet, when you look at a string of 365 days, what you can accomplish in a year is actually huge. It's actually massive when you can focus. And so I think that's really important. And then lastly is a habit. I love habits. Is there a new habit that works for you? Is there a new habit that, is there a habit that you want to change? Is there a habit that you want to add? Is there a habit that you want to let go of? We all have habits, and I think we only think of habits necessarily as like the good things that we do. But what you don't realize is that even the bad things that you do, those are habits. Like I had a really bad habit at the beginning of this year. We love, at the end of the day, we're tired. It's been a long day. And so like that last hour of the day, my husband and I like to watch a show. So we usually have a show that we're watching. And so we like to sit down. I don't want to think about anything. I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to watch my show and then go to bed with my book. And my habit that I had, which wasn't an intentional habit, but it became a habit, is every night I would eat a bowl of Cheez-Its while we were watching the show. And that was not good for me. I found that was not good. It was not good for how my clothes fit. It was not good for how I felt. Eating something right before I went to bed was not good for me. So I had to stop buying the Cheez-Its. And, that's a habit. It's a habit. And we don't realize I started replacing that habit with tea, drinking a cup of chamomile tea or peppermint tea. And so I still kind of have that experience of, like holding something and sipping something while I'm watching my show, but it's not, Cheez-Its. So is there a habit like that you want to stop or start or change? This could be a great time to think about that. So that is what I have for you today. We are here halfway. It's kind of crazy. Halfway through the year already. So here is this was your mid-year refresh. And I hope that you take some time, especially if you were listening to this episode while you were driving or maybe while you were out for a walk. It would be a good idea, I think, to maybe take a listen again when you can sit down, maybe outside with a notebook and, maybe you play and you write something, you pause and then you write something and just kind of go through it step by step. But truly taking this time for yourself, taking this time for your business is huge. And I hope that you will. So come message me on Instagram. I would love to know how your year has gone so far. And if you're choosing those priorities, let me know what they are. I'm at karen.w.cooper. And until next time, stay well.
Thank you for listening to Empowering Women in Real Estate, the podcast. Click subscribe to be notified every Wednesday when our latest episode is released, and be sure to check out our group on Facebook.